When people often ask, do you support these people or that people? Do you support this group or that group? I wonder I wonder what the motivation for the question is. Myself included, if I'm asking that question, like, what is my motivation? When we say support, what do we mean by that? You know, and I don't mean to split hairs, right? It may seem trivial, it may seem trite, but really, what do we mean by that? You know, words are not violence. Disagreement is not intolerance, right? Because nobody agrees with anyone 100% of the time. Like, look, there's nobody on earth I love more than my mother. And she's still alive, thank God. But there's things that my mother does in her life that I don't agree with. You know, I have a sister, you know, even some of my closest friends, they make decisions that I find very bewildering. And you know what? They could probably say the same thing about me. But do you think I love these people any less? You know, disagreement is not it's okay to have honest disagreements. In fact, I would even pose a thought experiment to people. Like, think about the one person in your life, not a celebrity, not a historical figure. Think about the one person in your life that you love the most and support the most, right? They can be passed away, but somebody that we've known personally in our lives, did we honestly agree with them at every turn, on every little thing? The answer is no. I mean, I think if we're really honest with ourselves, you know, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we love them any less, you know, and not just if I say, if I say I don't support this group or that group, right? I'm not devaluing or dehumanizing anybody, right? Because I could actually say, well, no, I don't really support what, maybe if it's an individual, I don't necessarily support what you're doing, but you're still my friend. You know, or I may not agree with what you're doing, but, you know, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and vice versa. If I do support what you're doing, right, and I do love you as a person, again, I'm still going to have disagreements with you from time to time. You know, it's not a black and white issue. It's not a binary issue. You know, life is far more nuanced than that. So, you know, I think for us Christians, and really could apply to anybody, you know, when people ask, you know, well, do you support this group or that group? You know, what do you think about this? You know, I would start with I would actually answer the question with a question. You know, again, what is your motivation by that? What is your motivation for the question, and what do you mean by that? Right? I think it might, when it comes to sensitive issues like this, like some things, I think it's helpful to lay some ground rules. You know, put up some boundaries, come to an understanding. You know, again, it could be fill in the blank, right? Because I feel like oftentimes what happens is that we confuse tolerance with favoritism, right? Am I really being tolerant, or am I playing favorites? And I think that gets confused, right? And we have to remember too, tolerance is for people and ideas we don't agree with. I don't have to tolerate something I agree with. I don't have to tolerate people that I agree with. I don't have to tolerate like-minded individuals. Tolerance is for people I don't agree with. You know, so if I say, well, you know, I'm so supposedly tolerant over X, Y, and Z, but then I lash out and attack anybody who doesn't support what I support, am I really being tolerant, or am I just playing favorites? You know, folks, grace, compassion, kindness, these things don't discriminate. There's no such thing as selective grace or selective compassion. You know, now, it's true, I might be, you know, we might show different amounts of grace and compassion to people. That's okay, right? It should still be present, though. You know, at the end of the day, again, you know, am I bringing some humility into the situation? Am I recognizing my own fallibility as an individual, right? I know I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. You know, and if somebody's going to say to me, well, you know, hey, Jeff, you could be wrong. Yeah, that's true. But so could you, right? And how often do we do that? How often do we ask ourselves, could I be wrong? Right? Not am I, but just could I be? You know, could I be wrong about, again, blank, fill in the blank, you know? I think that's a really good way to maintain some self-awareness, right? And it's okay to, you know, healthy individuals have strong boundaries and strong convictions, you know, and strong positions. A healthy individual is also willing to show some patience, some kindness, be a little gracious, right? And not be so fast to be triggered. No, not commit these like knee-jerk reactions. Think critically, think things through. I mean, I think that one way that I think that we can avoid being triggered so quickly is just to learn to come at things with a healthy level of skepticism, right? Because I look at it's intellectually lazy to be gullible, but it's also intellectually lazy. It's intellectually lazy to believe everything, but it's also intellectually lazy to dismiss everything. There has to be a happy medium. And one big problem that I think Western society is suffering from is that we use these broad sweeping statements, these nebulous, we paint with such a broad brush. And life is just more nuanced than that. Life is an ebb and a flow, right? I think sometimes, when people ask things about, are you, about abortion or gun control or what have you, we paint with these broad brushes, and it really does the subject matter a disservice. Oftentimes a little soundbite's not all that helpful. I mean, it may have its place depending on the situation. But again, I would ask people, like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean support? What do you mean agree or disagree? Like, I feel like sometimes, especially when it comes to sensitive issues like these, that we need to, peel back a few layers, and understand where somebody, look, we don't know people's stories. And I know a lot of this seems very common sense, and it is. Maybe somebody has a problem with, the gay community because something happened to them. It sounds cliche, but maybe something happened to them when they were younger. Maybe somebody hates guns because, again, something happened to them that involved a gun at some point in their lives, right? And it's stuff like that, whether I agree or disagree with you academically, right, I need to be, I need to have a little grace toward that. And understand, I don't know everybody's story. I don't know what people have been through. Now, obviously, no, we're not all just going to recite our entire life story at every turn. But I think it's a part of the, it's a part of the equation that I need to always keep in my mind, right? Yeah, maybe I don't agree with this person's approach. Maybe I don't, but you know what? Again, it's like, well, I don't know what that person's been through. I don't know, yeah, a lot of people can be very petty and juvenile. Sure. I think we all have moments of that. We all have moments when our egos get the best of us or we talk out of the side of our necks. It's when we start acting this way perpetually, when we get into such a sense of, superiority. We get so dug in, right? And where we get dug in, we get our politics and our religion, our culture, and our favorite ice cream flavor. We get dug in, but oftentimes what happens is we get so dug in that we can't see the forest from the trees. And when we can't see the forest from the trees, right, we start living in an echo chamber, in a bubble, right? And when that happens, everything outside, every person and idea outside of that bubble, outside of that chamber, in my experience, it becomes a threat. Well, and if I see you as a threat, then by definition, I'm probably gonna devalue you. I'm gonna devalue or dehumanize that person or that idea. I'm gonna strip that person of their basic human dignity. Because if I'm afraid of you and I think you're a threat or inferior, well, then by definition, I'm gonna take a position of superiority, right? And I'm gonna look down on you and your ideas and your group of people, right? And that's, I think, a big part of what's happening out in society right now. Is humans are really good at devaluing one another. We need to stop doing that. I can disagree with you, and that's part of what it means to be a decent human being, right? Can I disagree with you and still show you some basic human dignity? It doesn't mean I don't have to agree with you, I don't have to co-sign you, I don't have to validate you. I can still be gracious, though. I can still show you that dignity. And we're not going to be friends with everybody, and that's okay. Again, healthy adult, we get to choose our friends today. But even the people I choose not to be friends with, I don't have to be ugly toward them. I don't have to gossip about them. I feel Everyone pretty much has something to offer. Even the most hardened criminal in prison has a nugget of wisdom to share. Am I willing to listen? Am I willing to recognize my fallibility first? Or do I want to walk around and act as if I've got the human condition and the mysteries of the universe all figured out and wrapped up? You know, again, we have moments of that. But are we trying better? Are we trying to do better than that? You know, and yes, I do talk to all my fellow believers, but again, anybody who sees this video, I mean, this could help anybody, no matter what you believe. You know, and it is hard. I'm not saying this is easy. It does take, it's absolutely easier said than done. No question. It takes a lot of practice. You know, and a lot of that practice is humility on my part. You know. But again, are we even trying? Every day I wake up, I can choose to go about that day. I can be compassionate or I can be critical. Right? And again, I know that's kind of an oversimplification, but I think it paints the picture. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, what kind of a person are we? Are we going to choose to be? Because if I meet someone, and it doesn't have to be a romance, so it doesn't have to be a love interest. It could be just a friend or coworker. But if I meet someone, and over time I notice they say things like, Jeff, you know, I noticed something today and I thought it was very compassionate. You know, I read something today and I thought it was very compassionate. I saw something today and I thought it was very compassionate. What do you think I'm going to think about that person? I'm going to think that they're a very compassionate person because those are the lenses by which they wear and they see the world through. Now, if I meet someone and I notice they say things like, you know, Jeff, I saw something today and I thought it was really racist. I read something today, you know, and I heard something today and I thought it was really racist. What do you think I'm going to think about that person? I'm going to think they're a bit racist, right? Because for whatever reason, those are the lenses by which that person is wearing and seeing the world through. And that's just it. That's the hit. Folks, we all, myself included, we all have our biases. To be biased is to be human. We have a choice. We all wear a certain set of lenses, whether it be, you know, day by day or moment by moment. But what lenses are we going to put on? Are we going to put on lenses of bigotry and intolerance and anger and fear? Or are we going to put on lenses of compassion and patience and grace? You know? Again, I'm not saying it's easy. It's simple. It's not always easy. Not at all. But we all wear a set of lenses. And one of the most valuable life lessons I've ever learned is my behavior always says more about me than it does about anybody else. How I treat the world is a reflection of me. How you treat the world is a reflection of you. You know? I don't even remember where I learned that, but it's one of the best things I've ever heard. So, who are we going to be? What principles are we going to choose? What lenses are we going to wear day by day in and day out? Because we do have a choice. I think for today, that's about it. Take care.